Thank you all for joining us on this Wednesday morning. We are here to talk about the California Serves Grant Request for Applications, or RFA. This technical assistance webinar is provided by the Professional Learning Support Division, or PLSD, here at the California Department of Education, or CDE. You probably saw this webinar is being recorded, but I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. We are recording this webinar. My name is Sarah Smith. I am an education programs consultant in the Professional Learning Innovations Office, or PLEO. I am the lead consultant for the California Serves Grant, as well as the State Seal of Civic Engagement. You'll hear me call that the SSCE, or probably just the State Seal throughout this presentation today. And if you've participated in the State Seal, I'm sure we've probably emailed back and forth a few times. So thank you for joining today. I'm joined today by my colleague, Havana Chang. She is the Staff Services Analyst for the PLEO. She provides key support for this project. She is also my partner when it comes to mailing out the State Seal insignias each year. So we're really glad to have her here. Havana is going to be posting links in the chat. Um, She'll also be helping monitor for questions and answers as we go along. And I do want to mention, if you have a question, please use the question and answer tool that is in Zoom. And please just bear with us if we can't get to your question right away. I do have it pulled up, but it's over here to my right. So I may not always be looking at it while I'm presenting. If we don't get to your question right away, we do have time saved at the end for questions and answers. So I will get to it at the end of the presentation. All right, a little bit of housekeeping. You've probably seen all webinar participants have been placed on mute at this time. I mentioned Havana will be sharing links in the chat, and then that the question and answer tool is available if you do have questions during the presentation. And this morning, shortly after 8:30, we sent a copy of the slide deck to all registered attendees. So if you registered after 8:30, you probably did not get this email yet. After the webinar, I will go and send the slide deck to any people who registered after I sent out the presentation this morning. We will also send the PowerPoint with notes. I'm sorry, we will post the PowerPoint with notes to our CDE California Serves webpage at https://www.cde.ca.gov/631-781. And thank you, Havana, for adding those links to the chat. And we will post a recording of this webinar to our California Serves webpage, but it will take a few days, maybe up to a week for it to get posted because we have to transcribe it and review it and then process it for accessibility before it is posted. So give us a few days on that. All right, getting started, I'd like to begin by briefly reviewing the California Serves authorizing statute along with its general purpose. So we go back to the 2022 Education Omnibus Budget Trailer Bill, Assembly Bill 181, Section 71, which added Education Code, or EC Section 51475. This established the California Serves program, which is administered by the CDE in collaboration with California volunteers. And Havana has added a link to the California Volunteers webpage if you'd like to learn a bit more about all the amazing work that they do. The purpose of the California Serves program is to promote access to effective service learning for students in grade 12, with the goal of expanding access for high school graduates in obtaining a state seal through service learning. And you can learn more about California volunteers at https://www.californiavolunteers.ca.gov. Speaking about applicant eligibility, per EC Section 51475A, applicant eligibility is limited to local educational agencies, or LEAs. This is defined as a school district, a county office of education, a COE, or a direct funded charter school within the state of California that serves students in grade 12. Individuals, community agencies, private schools, individual public schools, state special schools, locally funded charter schools, and LEAs that previously received a California Serves grant and are still participating in a grant cycle are not eligible to apply for the California Serves grant. In the case of locally funded charter schools, what would happen is that the applicant LEA would be the COE. So if you're a locally funded charter school and you're interested in applying, you would work generally through your COE. If you need help identifying your charter school's funding model, you can refer to the California Charter Schools database at https://www.cde.ca.gov/ds/ap/lists.asp. A little bit more about applicant eligibility. There is one additional requirement per EC Section 51475D. At least 55% of pupils enrolled in the applicant LEA shall be unduplicated pupils as defined in Section 2574 or 42238.02 as applicable. And the unduplicated pupil count includes pupils who are English learners, who meet income or categorical eligibility requirements for free or reduced price meals under the National School Lunch Program, or are foster youth. And then unduplicated pupil just means that each pupil is counted only once, even if that pupil meets more than one of these criteria. You can review the 2025-26 California Serves eligibility spreadsheet, which is available from the CDE California Serves webpage to determine your LEA's unduplicated pupil count and related eligibility to apply for this grant. If you go to that spreadsheet and you're not seeing whether your LEA is eligible or not, you have to scroll all the way to the far right of the spreadsheet past all of the numbers and the data, and you'll see a yes or a no if your LEA is eligible. And finally, LEAs may only submit one application per grant cycle. Okay, moving on to program funding. The California Serves program includes an annual grant. It's an appropriation of $5 million annually to the CDE for awards to eligible LEAs. Funds available to each applicant are based on the content and quality of the submitted application and proposed activities, and each grantee shall receive no more than $500,000 for the entirety of the grant period. An LEA that applies for funds shall, at a minimum, demonstrate a need for service learning resources and training in support of offering the state seal locally, and describe how those funds will be used. The CDE will fund successful grant applications at the level requested if the program application is well justified, the proposed activities are realistic and well supported, and sufficient funding exists. If successful applications exceed the funds available, the CDE will apportion the grant funds at its discretion. Grantees may begin utilizing funds, may begin work on the California Serves grant beginning May 1st of 2026. And then these funds are available for expenditure or encumbrance through June 30th of 2028. So for the funding timeline, I want to take a little bit of time to expand on that. A county office of education that serves as the lead applicant, actually, let me back up just a little bit. So due to the timeline by which these funds are appropriated and released to the CDE each year, the first year of each grant is primarily spent administering the RFA. Grantees are typically notified of their status in the spring of that year and then may begin spending those funds on May 1st, 2026. So due to this really tight timeline, grant years 2 and 3 are when grantees generally do most of their grant work. Your LEA, if you are applying, you may decide to begin grant work during that shortened year 1, beginning with May 1st of 2026. It's up to you. So what this means is that grant year 1 runs from May 1st through June 30th of 2026. Grant year 2 is the full July 1st of 2026 through June 30th of 2027. And then grant year 3 is July 1st of 2027 through June 30th of 2028. And again, that June 30th, 2028 is the deadline for expenditure or encumbrance. So we get a lot of questions about applying as a consortium, so I'll talk a bit about that next. Um, a consortium may include a COE that serves as the lead applicant and oversees a partnership of multiple districts, a district that serves as the lead applicant for a partnership of multiple districts, or a direct funded charter school may also participate in a consortium either as a member or a lead applicant. Some important considerations to keep in mind if you are applying as a consortium include first, the lead applicant and all consortium members must meet the eligibility criteria. So you'd have to make sure that whoever's applying as the lead and then anyone else who is receiving grant funding also has a yes on that eligibility spreadsheet. Each participating LEA in the consortium is eligible to apply for up to $500,000. So the maximum grant award for each consortium depends on the number of participating LEAs and the amount of funds that they are requesting. For instance, if you have a consortium of 3 LEAs, they would be permitted to apply for a maximum grant of up to 1.5 million, with each of those 3 LEAs receiving no more than $500,000. If you are applying as a consortium, the lead applicant should submit one application on behalf of the consortium and then identify in the application, there's a specific spot for it, all LEAs that are part of the consortium. You would include one project budget for the consortium, and then the budget narrative should clearly explain how funds will be spent among the consortium members. No one consortium member may expend more than $500,000. And then you would provide any additional information related to the operations of the consortium in the proposed activities section of the online application. And I do see out of the corner of my eye questions are coming in. I am going to wait on those so I can try and get through the presentation. But if there is time for a break in the middle, I'll try and tackle those before we get to the end. But I do see them coming in, and I will get to them as soon as I can. Okay. Just a little bit more about applying as a consortium. The lead applicant should also be prepared to provide letters of commitment from all consortium members prior to a grant award notification being issued. And then again, please keep in mind the lead applicant will serve as the fiscal agent and be responsible for all grant deliverables, and that LEAs applying as a consortium lead applicant or member may not also submit any additional applications. An LEA may only be part of one application per grant cycle. So if you are part of a consortium, you would be part of that consortium in the application or the lead applicant, but then you are not able to also apply for a grant on your own, if that makes sense. Okay, speaking of funding, let's talk about allowable expenses. So under the program and then outlined in statute, grant or LEAs may use grants for paid planning time for teachers to increase the use of service learning and instruction, professional development or PD on service learning for administrators and teachers, purchase of instructional materials to help integrate service learning and instruction, participation costs that would include materials or travel expenses related to service learning activities, personnel costs for coordinating service learning at the LEA or a school site, and then participation costs associated with grant program evaluation. Emphasis shall be on programs that demonstrate rich civic engagement and learning in pursuit of a state seal, specifically through service learning. I want to take some time to review non-allowable expenses. This is one of the most common issues related to project budgets, is that the budget includes non-allowable expenses. The RFA does include a list of all non-allowable expenses, but some of the more common ones that we have seen include telephone systems. So this includes landlines, if anyone is still using those, but also cell phones and Wi-Fi hotspots or internet plans. Acquiring equipment for administrative or personal use. So this might be laptops for personnel that is administering the grant program. Although if you're looking at, say, Chromebooks for student use, for student service learning programs, that would generally be considered allowable. But if it's for personal administrative use, that would not be allowable. Furniture. So this would include, bookcases, chairs, desks, file cabinets. Purchasing or leasing facilities. And to clarify about that, short term, 1 day rentals for things like civic showcases are allowable. What we're talking about here is more longer term leases or rentals of facilities, but we do see short term rentals for 1 or 2 day civic showcases. You do want to check any requirements that come along with that rental, like food or security. I know sometimes those can be tied to these short term rentals. Speaking of food, food services, refreshments, banquets, or meals are considered non allowable expenses, and this one comes up frequently for events or conferences or field trips. Per diem is permitted. So if you are part of the grant staff and you are traveling and you get a per diem that includes meals, that is allowable. But unfortunately, things like banquets, um, meals for field trips, those are not allowable. And you can always ask us when it gets to that point, and we can let you know if something is or isn't allowable. Let's see, promotional favors, things like bumper stickers, pencils or pens, t shirts, or balloons are not allowable. Subscriptions or professional organization memberships, the planting of existing funds or efforts. This comes up sometimes when we see people wanting to use grant funds to put on a pre existing conference or showcase that has already been going on prior to the grant. And then any costs that are not reasonable or necessary to meet grant purposes. And again, there is a full list of non allowable expenses in the RFA, I believe, on page 5. All right, moving on to reporting requirements. To ensure the successful implementation of the California Serves Grant Program, grantees are required to submit quarterly progress and end of project reports to show that program outcome measures are being met alongside an expenditure report that shows how funds were actually spent. These must include any and all elements required by the CDE, as well as any locally identified or determined measures. LEAs will be expected to measure outcomes in areas specifically identified in the LEA's grant application. Program outcomes identified in the California Serves grant application can target and include, but are not limited to, the number of state seal insignias awarded or anticipated, government or U.S. history course pass rate, school attendance rate, chronic absenteeism rate, pupil suspension rate, school climate as measured by the California Healthy Kids Survey School Climate Module or other applicable climate survey. And the California Healthy Kids Survey is available from https://www.cde.ca.gov/592-448. And the last item on this list would include interview and focus groups with participating students. We ask that applicants measure the number of state seal insignias awarded and or anticipated, as well as at least one other measurable objective. Okay, moving on to program deliverables. A major program deliverable is the end of the year or end of the project report. Grantees must provide a summary of activities in a report identifying contributions, including but not limited to proposed measures to evaluate progress towards the program goals, including implementing service learning programs that lead toward awarding the state seal, resources, which could include training materials, videos, briefs, etc., to support teachers, administrators, pupils, or other school staff that provide support for local state seal programming. The report must also include technical assistance and PL or professional learning opportunities provided for the purpose of implementing and expanding access to the state seal through service learning, number of participating educators disaggregated by role, classrooms, and schools, and then the number of students earning and actively working towards the state seal through service learning. Okay, moving on to resources to support application development. And actually, this would be a good time for me just to take a quick look at the Q&A so far and see if we can tackle any of these. Although I see that there are 12. So on second thought, and some of them are lengthy, um, I apologize. What I'm going to do is just wait until the end of the presentation and then try and tackle any of these. I just want to make sure we have time to get through all of the information and then use any time at the end to answer your questions. So I apologize, but please bear with me and I will get to them at the end of the presentation. Okay, So, talking about some resources to support application development. Starting with the Quality Professional Learning Standards, or QPLS. These lay the foundation for creating a coherent set of professional learning policies and activities that span the career continuum of an educator, leading to improved educator knowledge, skills, and dispositions, and ultimately increased student learning results. These standards describe the criteria for quality professional learning and point educators towards using evidence based elements and indicators when making decisions about how to create or improve professional learning in their own systems. And the QPLS can be found at https:// www.cde.ca.gov/618-274. I want to talk a bit about service learning since this is a really important element of this grant. So, when we're looking at grant applications, strong applications will keep in mind the following considerations and resources. First, Education Code Section 51475D4 provides a definition of service learning. That is an educational approach that intentionally combines meaningful community service activities with instruction and reflection to support pupil progress toward academic and civic engagement learning objectives while meeting societal needs. So when we look at applications, we are looking at programs that reflect this this definition of service learning that is inherent in the civic engagement and civic learning state seal projects. Additionally, consider service learning programs that require students to engage in a cycle of inquiry. You might consider the inquiry arc that is outlined in the College, Career, and Civic Life, or C3 framework, which guides students to develop and investigate compelling civic questions, find and evaluate evidence to answer them, and communicate or take civic action on those answers. This framework is available from https://www.socialstiandards/C3. Also, consider incorporating suggestions and research from Appendix H, Practicing Civic Engagement, Service Learning in the History Social Science Framework. This is from the 2017 California History Social Science Framework, which is available from https://www.cde.ca.gov/627-385. I want to emphasize that all service learning programs should explicitly support student progress towards a state seal upon graduation, including fulfilling all 5 state seal statewide criteria, in addition to any additional local criteria or additional program components that may have been adopted locally. Develop service learning experiences in an ongoing process that allow educators, administrators, communities, and students to define civic engagement and service needs, and then set specific goals based on the needs of the LEA and any problems identified to be addressed. One final resource to know, our CDE resources to support civic engagement webpage features foundational resources on civic learning, civic engagement, and service learning. There's a lot of resources there to dig through. A link to this webpage will be provided in the chat. It's in the RFA. Thank you, Havana. You can also find it at https://www.cde.ca.gov/618-301. A quick word about evidence-based. It is important to note that PD and curriculum for the California Serves grant shall use evidence-based strategies. For the purposes of this grant, the CDE has borrowed the following definition. As defined by the Every Student Succeeds Act, or ESSA, an evidence-based practice is an activity, strategy, or intervention that demonstrates a statistically significant effect on improving student outcomes or other relevant outcomes based on strong evidence, moderate evidence, promising evidence, or a rationale with ongoing efforts to examine the effects of activity, strategy, or intervention. Additional information about the ESSA can be found at https forward slash, https:// www.cde.ca.gov/608962. Okay, now we are going to dig into the actual requirements of the grant application. I want to start by noting that the California Serves program, it's more than just the grant. It also required the development of model uniform metrics based on recommended criteria for the state seal for the measurement of pupil progress toward academic, civic engagement, and other learning objectives. We are excited to share that the model uniform metrics are now available from the Metrics tab of the California Serves webpage at https://www.cde.ca.gov/631781. And you can find the statewide state seal criteria from the Criteria and Guidance tab of the State Seal webpage at https://www.cde.ca.gov/PD/6368555. EC Section 51475 requires that these model uniform metrics be used in administration of the California Serves grant. So you will see them incorporated into relevant application questions, and grantee progress and end of project reports will also incorporate the model uniform metrics. Okay, moving on to the notice of intent to apply. In order to apply for a California Serves grant, applicants must first submit a notice of intent to apply via email to ssce@cde.ca.gov by Monday, November 17th, 2025 at 4 p.m. The email should be titled California Serves Grant Intent to Apply. The body of the email should include first the name of the LEA intending to apply. And as a reminder, if applying as a consortium, you would identify the lead applicant LEA and then provide the names of all consortium LEAs in this email. You should also provide the 14-digit county, district, school, or CDS code of the eligible LEAs intending to apply. So please be sure to include the LEA's CDS code rather than the school site's code. As a reminder, directly funded charters are considered LEAs and are eligible to apply for this grant. But if you're a locally funded charter, you should be applying generally through your county Office of Education. And if you're looking for help to locate your CDS code, you can access the California School Directory at https://www.cde.ca.gov/school directory. The notice of intent to apply email should also include a statement of the intent to apply for a California Serves grant. This can just be a simple statement that the LEA or LEAs, if it's a consortium, intend to apply for a grant. And then also the name, email address, and phone number of the primary contact person for this grant. Please do note that applications will not be accepted from LEAs that do not submit a notice of intent to apply by Monday, November 17th, 2025 at 4 p.m. After submitting the notice of intent to apply by the deadline, you will receive an email that confirming that we have received your intent to apply, and then a link to the online application. So you submit this notice of intent to apply, and then you also complete the online application. This may be accessed from the California Serves Grant RFA webpage at https://www.cde.ca.gov/651-847. You can find online application instructions in the appendix of the RFA, and we ask that you respond to all sections of each prompt of the narrative description. Just a couple more submission requirements before we get into the questions. So, in addition to the narrative, applicants must also separately attach supporting evidence. This includes a timeline in Word, PDF, or Excel format, uh, a budget in Excel format. There is a digital signature that you attach or that you include in the application. And then you submit the application by Monday, December 1st, 2025 at 4 o'clock p.m. We recommend referring to the scoring rubric in the California Serves Grant RFA to understand how responses for each application will be evaluated by the reading panel. That rubric is part of an appendix to the RFA. Please note that in the online application portal, you must select Save Responses on the first page of the online application if you don't intend to complete the application in one session. Once you select the Save Responses button, a page will appear that asks for your email address. Then you will receive an email with a unique URL or web address for entrance back into the application. Although you should receive the confirmation email, I do recommend that you copy the URL on the application page and save it just in case, because that address will allow you to return to your application. Okay, so looking at breaking down the application a bit more and some point values. Each section has a specific amount of points, with each item in a section having a maximum point value. So section A, the executive summary, has a total possible point value of 4 points. Section B, the theory of action, has a maximum point value of 12 points. Section C, demonstrated need, has a maximum point value of 12 points. Section D, proposed activities, is worth a maximum of 16 points. Section E, proposed metrics, is worth a maximum of 16 points. Let's see, the timeline is worth a maximum of 8 points, and then the budget, which includes the proposed budget and the budget narrative, is worth a maximum of 12 points. Please note that the CDE may request revisions to budgets, and as a reminder, point values, while they are very important, they are not the only factors considered when selecting an awardee. All right, we talked just briefly about an overview of the application. Section A, the executive summary. Section B, theory of action. Section C, demonstrated need. Section D, proposed activities. And Section E, proposed metrics. And we'll now go into the questions that make up part of each section of the application narrative. So for Section A, the executive summary, you will provide an executive summary statement which contains first, the current status of the state seal in the applicant LEA. Second, a summary of the theory of action, which you will expand on in the following section, which addresses how the LEA will promote access to effective service learning for students in grade 12, with the goal of expanding access for high school graduates in obtaining a state seal through service learning. The executive summary should also include an approximate number of educators and students to be affected by this work, and how the LEA plans to use these funds to promote access to effective service learning for students in grade 12, with the goal of expanding access for high school graduates in obtaining a state seal through service learning. Section B is the theory of action. So you will articulate a theory of action which will support the goals of the grant. The U.S. Department of Education defines a theory of action as exactly how a policy is intended to change behavior and improve outcomes is described in a theory of action. A theory of action is a logical argument of how a policy is intended to work. Specifically, it is the logical sequence of steps and policy mechanisms that collectively influence one another to result in the long-term objective of the policy in question. If the stated purpose of the policy is the why, the theory of action depicts the how. So you can find more information about the theory of action at bit.ly/bit.doryofation. So in your theory of action, you should be including what are the LEA's specific goals based on the needs of the LEA and any problems identified to be addressed. how the LEA will identify participants for the activities of this grant, how the LEA will ensure active participation, and what are the outcomes expected by the LEA as a result of grant activities. Okay, moving on to our next section, section C, which is demonstrated need. This has 3 questions in this section. So first, we ask that applicants describe the general climate within the LEA as it pertains to civic engagement, service learning, and the state seal for the past 12 to 24 months, including describing student population subgroups that have been involved in these opportunities and the nature of their involvement. The second question refers to equitable access. We are looking at who are the students that would benefit most from achieving the state seal through service learning. What do you know about their academic, social, and civic experiences? And in what ways would a service learning program help promote civic engagement and learning, including equitable access to the state seal? The third question refers to past and ongoing service learning efforts. And this question we get frequently when it comes to the grant. I am guessing that there's at least one question in the Q&A about this, so hopefully this helps. Um, So we are looking at describing past and or ongoing opportunities that exist for students to engage in service learning and civic engagement, including working towards a state seal. So you will be asked in this question to indicate whether or not your LEA currently offers the state seal. It is not required in order to apply for a grant. Now, if your LEA does currently offer the state seal, we ask that you describe relevant local programming to offer the state seal through service learning. If your LEA does not yet offer the state seal, we ask that you describe service learning and civic engagement opportunities available to students that will form the basis of a local state seal program. So, to summarize, you don't have to already be offering the state seal in order to apply. If you're not, we are just looking at what are your plans and how does this grant support you offering the state seal locally. Hopefully that's helpful. All right. Moving on to section D, proposed activities. This includes two questions. The first question is a summary of proposed activities. Articulate the LEA's proposed activities regarding how they will address the goals of the California Serves Grant Program. Explain how funds will be used for eligible training, resources, and other activities to promote access to effective service learning for students in grade 12 with the goal of expanding access for graduates in obtaining a state seal through service learning. And proposed activities should reflect an understanding and integration of the 5 statewide state seal criteria and the definition of service learning as outlined in EC section 51475D4. And the second question in this section refers to current research. Describe how the applicant will leverage current research and work related to service learning and student civic engagement. If the LEA proposes to implement PD or curriculum, detail which evidence-based strategies will be utilized. Section E is proposed metrics. This includes 4 questions, and this will be the section where you will see incorporation of the model uniform metrics. So the first question refers to measures and data that will be used to assess pupil outcomes. For some context, grant requirements or grant recipients, will be required to report to the CDE all of the following information: the number of participating pupils in schools, the demographics of pupils engaged in service learning as a result of the grant, and the impact of the service performed by pupils and school staff as a result of the grant. So there are 2 parts for this question. We are looking at first, describe how the LEA will use the model uniform metrics developed in accordance with EC section 51475B4 to assess pupil progress across the 5 state seal criteria. Additionally, describe any other outcome measures that will be used to demonstrate program impact and student learning. The next 2 questions in this section are first, methods. Describe the methods that will be used to collect the outcome data, including tools and methods for quantitative and qualitative analysis as they relate to the model uniform metrics. And then capacity. This has two parts to this question. Describe the LEA's capacity to collect, disaggregate, and report the identified outcome measures, including the model uniform metrics. Additionally, explain how the LEA will handle internal administration of the grant, including personnel, record keeping, continuous communication, and continuous improvement. And the fourth and final question for this section is about process. Describe the process the LEA will use to analyze and respond to the data collected, including data related to the model uniform metrics, to assess program effectiveness and make mid-course adjustments. Okay, moving on from the narrative portion of the application and on to the attachments. So required attachments will be requested at the end of the online application. The only attachments allowed are the grant program timeline and then the proposed budget. So when you upload these to the application, you'll be saving these files into a single zip file that will then be uploaded to the system. It will only allow you to upload one file. So we ask that you just save them into one zip file or zip folder, and then you upload that zip folder to the application. If any additional information is included in the zip file, it will not be reviewed. We will just review the timeline and the budget. And the zip file size limit is 20 megabytes. It should be more than enough for those two files. Okay, so a little bit more about the project timeline. The project timeline may be provided as a Microsoft Word, Excel, or PDF file. Please note there is no template provided online for the timeline. And the timeline should thoroughly and convincingly first illustrate the sequence of events and activities of the project. Second, include the person or organization responsible for each activity. Third, include the expected goal of the activity. And fourth, include how the effectiveness of the activity will be measured. And then the second attachment is the proposed budget. We require that you use the budget template that is available from the California Serves RFA webpage at https://www.cde.ca.gov/651-847. You'll see it right there in the table on that webpage, and it's an Excel file that you can download. So the application budget template covers the entire grant period, so from May 1st, 2026 to June 30th of 2028. The file includes 6 tabs. There is one tab for applicant information. There is a tab for the budget summary. There are 3 tabs for the budget narratives, one tab for each year of the grant, and then one tab you don't have to worry about. It's for form approval. It's one that we worry about ourselves. The budget will be uploaded, as I mentioned, as an attachment at the end of the application. We ask that you please do not convert it to a PDF before submitting. Otherwise, we'll just have to ask you to email us the Excel file, but we need that Excel file for the budget instead of the PDF. We do review and score the app on the budget. And just one more clarification, like I mentioned, it does include a tab for each of the 3 years of the grant, but you are only required to fill out the years for which you are using funding. So if you're not going to be using funding for that abbreviated first year, you don't have to enter any amounts into that first year. So the applicant in the budget must provide a thorough and detailed justification for each identified cost associated with implementing the proposed goals and activities, including why the costs are reasonable and necessary to support the proposal's goals and activities. And as I kind of insinuated in the in the previous slide, although the grant period ends on June 30th, 2028, LEAs may expend all California Serves grant program funds early. So maybe you're planning to just go really, hit this program hard in year 2 and all of your activities and all of your funds will be in year 2, then you would only have to fill out that tab for year 2 of the project budget. Again, you'll only complete the sections of the budget forms that are necessary to align with the project's timeline. Digging a bit more into the budget, You will be providing expenditure amounts for the following areas as they apply to your project: internal staff compensation, compensation for educators or substitute costs associated with participation at professional learning events, supplies required to support LEAs and grant participants, services provided by the applicant and external entities, any travel, communication expenses, and then any indirect charges. The proposed budget must include a detailed budget narrative or description for each line item included in the grant period. So in the narrative, you should be including how the proposed costs are necessary and reasonable in terms of grant activities, benefit to participants, and grant outcomes. You should provide sufficient detail and a breakdown or a calculation that justifies each line item. You will be grouping line items by object code series and provide lines for object code totals. And the proposed budget summary should provide totals for each object code and also align with the proposed budget narrative. Okay, we're getting close to the end here. I just want to talk a little bit about the review process, the timeline, and then share contact information before getting into questions. So only fully completed eligible applications will be considered eligible for consideration and advanced to the Readers Conference. A panel of readers selected for their expertise will review, read, and score each eligible application using a scoring rubric. And again, that rubric is available as an appendix at the end of the RFA. Although scores are very important, they will not be the only factor considered when selecting awards. And a brief rundown of our timeline. Here are the important upcoming deadlines for California grant program applications. We released the RFA the week of September 25th, 2025. As I mentioned, the notice of intent to apply is due Monday, November 17th, 2025 by 4 p.m. The application is due to the CDE Monday, December 1st, 2025 by 4 p.m. We anticipate posting the intent to award the week of February 9th, 2026. The last date for appeals to be received by the CDE will be 1 week after the intent to award is posted. So that date can change a little bit. It's just 7 days after we post the intent to award. And then the final awards are anticipated to be posted the week of March 30th, 2026. Please note this timeline is subject to change. The California Serves Grant webpage will be the most up-to-date place to find any changes to the timeline. All right, I know we have questions, so I'm just going to post our contact information before I get to those. Our email is ssce@cde.ca.gov. I think 4 of us have access to that. So if you email that inbox, at least one of us should see it fairly quickly, and we will get back to you as soon as possible. And let's see what questions we have. Havana, thank you very much for tackling some of those open questions. I really appreciate that. Okay, so I'm starting at the top. First question, please clarify if we currently have a California Serves grant that is ending in June, can we apply again for 26, 28? So if you are part of, let's see, cohort 1, and your grant ended in, let's see, on June 30th of 2025, you would be eligible to apply for this particular round of grants. This is our 4th year of offering the grant. Some cohort 1 grantees have a budget that extends through March 30th of 2026. Those grantees would not be eligible to apply because they are still receiving funds in the 2025-26 grant year. And then if you are part of cohorts 2 or 3, you also are unfortunately not eligible to apply as you are still participating in the grant while this new grant cycle is running. So to summarize, if you are a cohort 1 grantee whose project ended June 30th of 2025, you would be eligible. Any other grantees will not be eligible. I believe cohort 2 grantees will become eligible for next year's grant, cohort 3 for the following year's grant, and then for those cohort 1 grantees that have a budget ending June 30th, or I'm sorry, March 30th of 2026, you would be eligible for next year's grant. Let's see, next question. Please confirm if the COE is not listed as eligible, it cannot lead the consortium. If a COE program, such as a charter school, is eligible, then it should be listed as the consortium lead. So anyone who is participating in this grant program must be considered eligible. So if you are participating in a consortium and you're the lead applicant, you would have to be considered eligible. If you are participating just as part of a consortium, you would have to be eligible. I know sometimes it can get tricky looking at countywide eligibility, especially if you are a locally funded charter. So if you're in a situation where it looks like your county isn't eligible, but you think it might be, please reach out to us at ssce@cde.ca.gov, and I can dig into the data and find out for you and let you know. Let's see, next question. Is there a limit on the amount of personnel costs that can be granted? There is no limit. So what we would do is we would look at your application narrative and then compare that with the budget. And if your program is really designed on just funding personnel, then we would expect to see that in your grant budget. So there is no limit. We just look to make sure that the budget reflects the application and vice versa. I knew we would get this question, and I almost mentioned it during the presentation. Does service learning and the teachers who support them have to be in grade 12? Technically, no, but I want to expand on that a little bit. The statute does specifically mention, service learning for students in grade 12. So, and the state seal, by and large, is awarded to students in grade 12. A lot of that is because criterion 2 of the state seal, that focuses on the content that students must learn. It really requires completion of US history and then your American government course, which is, of course, usually in grade 12. So, most of the time we are seeing service learning and teachers and participants being those that support grade 12. However, the state seal is available for students as low as grade 10, provided that they meet all of the state seal criteria and other local requirements. So it's not restricted only to grade 12 teachers. Generally, it's focused on high school grade levels. So looking at professional learning, materials, certificated classified personnel that support students in high school. We do sometimes get asked if grant funding can be used for students and teachers in elementary, middle, or junior high school. Um, we don't see it very often. And one of the reasons why is because it can be very, very hard to track a student who is, taking advantage of these opportunities, say in middle school, to see whether or not they earn that state seal by the time they're in grade 12. So it doesn't happen often. And if you do go that route, you have to be very, very clear at how you are tracking how students are or looking at how students are later going on to earn that state seal in grade 12. So long answer, kind of shortened. It is not restricted to students and teachers in grade 12. It is primarily aimed at students in high school and teachers in high school and high school programs. But if you have a special application or you're really thinking about this project at looking at a long-term civic engagement pathway, you would just have to be very, very clear about how students are using those opportunities and resources to then get the state seal later in high school. And if that wasn't clear, I apologize. Please send us an email and I'd be happy to talk through it more with you. Okay, next question. Can we pay for sub costs or must it be time after school or on a Saturday? You can pay for all of the above. Sub costs, after school stipends, Saturday work, whatever makes most sense for your project. There's no restriction on that. All right, next question. Can community partners personnel cost who would support the service learning PD and student service learning projects be included in the budget? If I understand that correctly, it's looking at, say, you have maybe a nonprofit organization that might be helping develop training or supporting students working through projects. If that's the case, that is fine. That would usually be incorporated. Oh, geez, I think it's Object Code 5800 sub agreements. So we do see that happening if you are using grant funds to go towards an external organization, like say the California History Social Science Project. That is allowable. That's considered an allowable expense. You would just explain it in the budget narrative, and then it should be reflected in your application narrative. Next question, if an LEA is part of a consortium that ends this year, are they able to apply for the next round of grants? Unfortunately, it sounds like in this case, no. That LEA would still be participating in the grant this year. I'm thinking you mean probably ending June 30th of 2026. So in that case, they would not be eligible. Basically, it would be anyone who's receiving grant funds that stop spending money and stop participating June 30th of 2025 would be eligible. I think this is a follow-up question. Our county office is on the eligibility list, meeting the 55% requirement. We provide PD to teachers in all the districts we serve, as well as our own schools. Oh, okay, I see. Do all PD participants have to come from districts that fit the eligibility criteria? Or can professional learning program serves teachers more broadly and have grant activities that provide targeted support for teachers? Um, I think I understand. If so, the answer is the grant funds are really restricted to LEAs that meet that 55% requirement. So your county is on the list as eligible, but you're hoping to provide PD to all teachers in the county and all LEAs. That would not be acceptable or allowable. You would have to restrict it to just the LEAs that meet that 55% eligibility requirement. And if that didn't help, please feel free to clarify or send us an email. And then let's see, I do not see any indication that there were any consortiums in the program's first year. That is correct. So the cohort 1, 2022-23 did not have any consortiums. We only began incorporating those, I believe, in cohort 2 and cohort 3. We definitely have a couple of consortiums. Next question, does it count as service learning for students volunteering for FFA, orchard, animal care, community garden, pure court? Short answer is it can. Just very, very briefly, what service learning essentially is looking at is there a connection between the students' civic engagement with what they're doing in these activities or in these organizations? Does it connect back to the classroom? Is there some type of learning component that really connects the activity with the in-class learning? So FFA work, animal care, community garden, peer court, those all can be service learning projects. There just has to be a connection back to what the student is learning in the classroom. Great question. Let's see. Do we have to identify the LEAs we will support specifically applying as a consortium? Or can we just say the county office will support LEAs who meet eligibility requirements across our county? You do have to specifically identify those LEAs within your application. So we ask for that list of LEAs in the intent to apply and then also in the application. And the reason why is we have to go through and just verify that they're all eligible before we award grant funds. Now, I understand that we update that eligibility list every year. So perhaps there is an LEA that is not eligible when you're applying that then becomes eligible, in the next year of the grant. We can incorporate that if you want to go that route. There is a process to revise your budget later on in the grant once you've received the funds. And so that's how we would do it. We would just process a budget revision that incorporates that newly eligible LEA. I think I've tackled all of the questions on the list. Yeah, I wanted to give it just a second to see if any other ones come up. Is there somewhere we can see some of the student outcomes of the programs awarded grants to date? That is a great question. I am actually working on a legislative report that will summarize a lot of these projects that we've had so far and student outcomes. I am not sure at what time that will be available, but if you want to reach out directly, Marion, I think you and I have talked before. I can try and share some of that information with you in the meantime while we finalize that report. Oh, you're welcome, Mary. Okay, I'm just giving it a second to see if anything else comes up. If you think of a question later, again, our email address is ssce@cde.ca.gov. It's on the screen. As a reminder, if you registered late and you did not get the slide deck, I will be emailing that out a little bit later today. And then give us roughly a week to process and transcribe and post an accessible version of this recording. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions coming up. I thank you for your time. I know that was a ton of information from me, so I appreciate you all showing up and listening, and I appreciate all of the thankful question or thoughtful questions as well. We are really grateful that this grant has continued, so we're excited to offer it for a fourth year. All right. No other questions, so I think we will call it. Thank you all, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. And thank you, Havana. Take care, everyone.